The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francis Donald, and I'd like to welcome you to the third episode in an ongoing series of webinars on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent sessions will be available on makara.us under the subtitle Open Webinars. You can see it there on the bottom left. And then that'll open the screen that you see on the right. You can find the series you're interested in. Okay, once more with some housekeeping stuff. If you have any questions or problems with the GoToMeeting interface, feel free to text BL. Just write in the little text box there that says type message here. So it's about halfway down your control panel. You see it on the screen on the bottom left there. There's basically two buttons that you have to worry about. One of them is your microphone button, which allows you to mute yourself or unmute yourself. If you raise your hand, which is the other button there to the right, the little hand with the arrow on it, if you click on that, your signal goes out that you've raised your hand, but you need to have your microphone unmuted for us to be able to, for you to be heard. So, okay, and one last plug with the headsets. It's just a great idea to have them. It's not absolutely necessary, but you'll have your sound will be much clearer and your voice when speaking will be much clearer. So they're cheap. You can get a really good one for less than 20 bucks. So just make sure it's a computer headset and not a stereo headset. You can find them on Amazon.com and a lot of other places, Best Buy, etc. Okay, and finally, feel free to at any time enter questions or comments or quotes in the text box. It's great if you want to share a quote, or in the chat. Or if you're having some problems with your audio, you can always use the chat box. Okay, let's get to it. During the first 20 minutes or so of each webinar, we'll continue to explore HPB's life and character using primarily Henry Olcott's old diary leaves. We followed HPB and Colonel Olcott from New York, where they were fast gaining a reputation for their evening salons or soirees, during which HPB would often manifest psychic phenomenon, to England, then on to Bombay, India, where within a few days they were championing the ancient wisdom teachings before large audiences. Response to their appearance was swift and enthusiastic. The prominent Bombay newspaper, the Indian Spectator, said, "A greater mission never was conceived. Let the Aryans make common cause. Let the Hindus, Parsis, Mohammedans, Christians forget their differences, and the day of India's regeneration is not far off." Today, I'd like to share just one story from Old Diary Leaves, which reveals the unique relationship between HPB and her guiding masters. Because it's a rather long story, we'll divide it among several readers. So if you'd like to choose a reader, BL, and we'll start with this paragraph.
Walter, can you please start for us?
Yes. Beginning with 29th March 1879, there were a series of strange occurrences in which Moolji Thackersey, an old friend and traveling companion of Colonel Olcott's, was the chief witness. On the day in question, HPB told Moolji to fetch a buggy, and when it came, mounted into it with him. She refused to answer his questions as to whither she was going, simply telling him to order the driver to turn right or left or go straight ahead. What happened, Mulji told us on their return in the evening. She had directed the course by numerous windings of street and country roads until they found themselves at a suburb of Bombay, 8 or 10 miles distant, in a grove of coniferae.
Right. Next reader.
Michael, can you please read for us?
Yes. Roads and paths crossed each other confusedly in the wood, but HPB never faltered as to her course and bade the driver turn and turn again until they came to the seashore. Finally, to Mulji's amazement, they were brought up by the gate of a private estate, with the magnificent rose garden in front and a fine bungalow with spacious eastern verandas in the background. HPB climbed down and told Mulji to await her there, and not for his life to dare come into the house. So there he waited in a complete puzzle. For such a property he, a lifelong resident of Bombay, had never heard of before. He called one of several gardeners who were there hoeing the flowers, but the man would not tell him nothing as to his master's name, how long he had lived there, or when the bungalow was built. A most unusual thing among Hindus. HPB had walked straight up to the house, had been received cordially at the door by a tall Hindu of striking and distinguished appearance, clad entirely in white, and had gone inside. After some time, the two reappeared. The mysterious stranger bade her farewell and handed her a great bunch of roses, which one of the gardeners had brought to his master for the purpose. And HPB rejoined her escort, re-entered the buggy, and ordered the driver to return home.
Next reader, please.
Leah, please go ahead.
All that Mulji could draw out of HPB was that the stranger was an occultist with whom she was in relation and had business to transact that day. The strangest part of this story was that, so far as we knew, there was no possibility of HPB's having learnt anything about this suburb and the way to it, for she had never left the house alone. Yet she had shown the completest familiarity with both. Whether any such bungalow existed or not, we had no means of knowing, save on Mulji's testimony. He was so amazed with his experience as to go on telling it to his friends in the town, which led one, who professed to know the suburb in question perfectly, to lay a wager of 100 rupees that there was no such bungalow by the seashore and that he could not guide anyone to it. When HPB heard this, she offered to bet Mulji that he would lose the other wager, whereupon he, declaring that he could retrace every foot of the way by which they had gone, closed with the offer, and I had a carriage called at once, and we three entered it.
Next reader, please.
Karen, please go ahead.
You might not believe this, but I can hear you, but I can't see anything.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, and I did,
So,
but then I did something and it disappeared. So,
you might choose to reboot and get back on, or leave the webinar and then go to your link and click back in, and you may get it all back.
okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Another reader.
Kay, can you read to it for us, please?
Self-mute, okay. Probably.
No, she's not muted.
Oh, she's not. Okay.
Okay. Yvonne, can you read for us, please?
After a long drive by devious ways, we reached the wood, in whose shady depths the mysterious bungalow was supposed to stand. We could see a number of roads running in different directions, and I told Muji that he must keep a sharp lookout, or he would assuredly get lost. He, however, was as confident as possible, despite the gift.
Oops, we lost you.
Now to this side, now to the other, now stopping for him to dismount from the box and look about him. At last, and just a minute or so after his declaring himself perfectly sure that we were driving straight for the seaside bungalow, a train rattled by on a near embankment, and thus showed poor Muji that he had guided us in the very opposite direction from the one.
We've lost you, Yvonne. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was hoping it was her and not me, but it's just too bad that we did lose her.
No, yeah, we did lose her. Eva, can you please read for us, starting from about the middle of this page?
Start at last in just a minute. You know what? I'm going to read this, finish this one, and then you can read the next one, Eva. So, at last, in just a moment or so after his declaring himself perfectly sure that we were driving straight for the seaside bungalow, a train rattled by on a nearby embankment and thus showed poor Mulji that he had guided us in the very opposite direction from the one desired. We offered to give him as much time as he liked to pursue his search, but he felt completely baffled and gave in as beaten. So we drove home. Okay, Eva.
Hey, all of these are just not interested. It's not me. They keep saying Eva.
Can you read for us, please, Eva?
Sure. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
You're fine.
Okay. Did we, am I supposed to start here with HPB? I'm sorry, I had to just walk away for a second. Is that where I'm okay.
Just read what's on the screen, yeah.
Okay, thank you. HPB told all of us that Mulji would have found the mystical bungalow if a glamour had not been brought to bear on his sight, and moreover, that the bungalow, like all other spots inhabited by adepts, was always protected from the intrusion of strangers by a circle of illusion formed about it and guarded and kept potent by elemental servitors. This particular bungalow was in the constant keeping of an agent who could be relied upon and used as an occasional resting and meeting place by gurus and chelas when traveling. All the buried ancient libraries and those vast hoards of treasure which must be kept hidden until its karma requires its restoration to human use are, as she said, protected from the discovery by the profane, by the illusory pictures of solid rocks, unbroken, solid ground, a yawning chasm, or some such obstacle which turns aside the feet of the wrong men, but which Maya dissolves away when the predestined finder comes to the spot in the fullness of time.
Thank you, Eva. Appreciate it. Okay, so we'll continue to follow HPB's adventures in India in the next webinar. But now let's do a quick review of the first two symbols presented on pages 1 and 2 of the Proem. The first of these, you may remember, is an immaculate white disc within a dull black ground, which HPB tells us represents cosmos in eternity before the reawakening of still slumbering energy. Eternity here used stands in a causal relationship to time. The symbol represents a condition that precedes manifestation at any and every level. What the ancient wisdom teachings call the day be with us. a state of non-being represented by the first stanza of the stanzas of Zon, which we'll get to at some point. The second image, let me bring that up, is the same white disk, but with a point at its center. HPB writes the following about this second image. And let's go ahead and get a reader for this. And what I'd like to do, and this will always be the case, is to read the definitions, which are set off in that text box up in the upper right. We'll always read the definitions first and then read the text, and that way the definitions can inform our text. So could we get a reader for this, please? Hello, BL? Hello?
Can you hear
Did you
me?
lose BL? Yeah, I could just now hear you.
Okay. Martha and Gabrielle, are you there? Can you?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes.
Pralaya, a period of obscuration or repose, planetary, cosmic, or universal, the opposite of Manvantara. Mundane egg, of this earthly world rather than a heavenly or spiritual one, spiritual here being a relative term. Cosmos, Greek, the universe as distinguished from our world, globe or earth. Manvantara, a period of manifestation, as opposed to pralaya, rest or dissolution, applied to various cycles.
Okay, Martha, would you go ahead and read the text?
Okay. The point in the hitherto immaculate disk, space, and eternity in pralaya denotes the dawn of differentiation. It is the point in the mundane egg, the germ within the latter which will become the universe, the all, the boundless periodical cosmos, this germ being latent and active periodically and by turns. The one circle is divine unity, from which all proceeds, whither all returns. Its circumference, a forcibly limited symbol in view of the limitation of the human mind, indicates the abstract, ever incognizable presence, and its plane, the universal soul, although the two are one. Only the face of the disk being white and the ground all around black shows clearly that its plane is the only knowledge, dim and hazy though it still is, that is attainable by man. It is on this plane that the Manvantaric manifestations begin, for it is in this soul that slumbers during the pralaya, the divine thought, wherein lies concealed the plan of every future cosmogony and theogony.
Thank you. So these are the two most profound symbols in the entire Secret Doctrine, being at the highest causal levels. In fact, everything we will discuss during these mini webinars could trace their origins back to the second of these symbols. But curiously, these two symbols are in a way also the simplest of all those we will consider. Simple because for us they are just conceptual markers whose reality lies completely and totally beyond our ability to gain even an inkling of any direct awareness of them. Furthermore, if we were all masters of wisdom, the same would be true, for the reality that these two symbols represent is completely beyond the scope and consciousness of any being in our solar system. So why even consider them? Well, one reason we're told is because such a consideration stimulates the intuition. They also help us to set up a causal framework for understanding those ideas that we can grasp. Okay, with HPB's comments on these two symbols fresh in our minds, let's pick up where we left off during the last webinar on page 2 of the Proem. To make the reading easier to comprehend, we'll start with the short bios on the right there. So could we get a reader? If this these are a line of philosophers from ancient Greece that were sometimes teachers and students of the others, all holding a particular philosophy. So if we could just quickly go through a description of these four Greek philosophers.
Alex, can you read for us, please?
Yeah. Leucippus, 5th century BCE, is reported in some ancient sources to have been a philosopher who was the earliest Greek to develop the theory of atomism, the idea that everything is composed entirely of various imperishable, indivisible elements called atoms. Democritus, meaning chosen of the people, 460 to 370 BC, was an influential ancient Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, primarily remembered today for his formulation of an atomic theory of the universe. Epicurus, ally or comrade, 341 to 270 BC, taught that the universe is infinite and eternal, and events in the world are ultimately based on the motions and interactions of atoms moving in empty space. And Lucretius, 15 October 99 BC to 55 BC, was a Roman poet and philosopher. His only known work is the didactic philosophical poem De Rerum Natura, about the tenets and philosophy of Epicureanism, and which is usually translated into English as On the Nature of Things.
Thank you, Alex. I'll have you read again in just a moment. I just want to interject here that this philosophy was of causal atomic structure rather than what we think of as atoms from the scientific point of view. They're related and carried that line from the 5th century all the way to the 1st century BC. So go ahead and if you would please, Alex, read the next paragraph.
Yeah. Almost 5 centuries BC, Leucippus, the instructor of Democritus, maintained that space was filled eternally with atoms actuated by a ceaseless motion, the latter generating in due course of time when those atoms aggregated. Rotatory motion through mutual collisions producing lateral movements. Epicurus and Lucretius taught the same, only adding to the lateral motion of the atoms the idea of affinity, an occult teaching.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this line of Greek masters at this point. They'll come up again. Suffice it to say that the atoms referred to are causal and eternal, and that the philosophy described has as much to do with the nature of motion as with the atoms demonstrating that motion. Okay, so could we get a reader for, again, we'll start with the definitions on the right.
Asha, can you read for us, please?
Yes. Intracosmic stands in a causal relationship to cosmos. Cosmos, the universe, is distinguished from our world, globe, or earth. Noumenon, the true essential nature of being as distinguished from the elusive objects of sense.
Thank you. Now, could you continue to read the text, please?
Okay. From the beginning of man's inheritance, from the first appearance of the architect of the globe he lives in, the unrevealed deity was recognized and considered until its only philosophical aspect, universal motion, the thrill of the creative breath in nature. Universal motion, the thrill of the creative breath in nature. Occultism sums up the one existence thus: deity is an arcane, living or moving fire, and the eternal witnesses to this unseen presence are light, heat, and moisture. This trinity including and being the cause of every phenomenon in nature. Intracosmic motion is eternal and ceaseless. Cosmic motion, the visible, or that which is subject to perception, is finite and periodical. As an eternal abstraction, it is the ever-present. As a manifestation, it is finite both in the coming direction and the opposite, the two being the alpha and omega of successive reconstructions. Cosmos, the noumenon, has not to do with the causal relations of the phenomenal world. It is only with reference to the intracosmic soul, the ideal cosmos, in the immutable divine thought, that we may say, it never had a beginning, nor will it have an end. With regard to its absolute, with regard to its body or cosmic organization, though it cannot be said that it had a first or will ever have a last construction, yet at each new Manvantara, its organization may be regarded as the first and the last of its kind, as it evolutes every time on a higher plane.
Thank you. So we have here two great contrasting realities, the noumenal or intracosmic and the temporal or cosmic, the latter emanating from the former. The single, quote, philosophically viable quality of these two is motion. One eternal and ceaseless, that's the intracosmic, the other finite and periodical. Any further thoughts about this? Anybody have any ideas about this concept of motion as it is connected with the intracosmic realms?
Asha, please go ahead and ask your question.
When we talk about the absolute, when Michael's been talking about, identify as being, and when we talk about the all absolute, I couldn't wrap my mind, but this is so complex. It says intracosmic motion is eternal and ceaseless, and cosmic motion is finite and periodical. So would we equate or somehow correlate intracosmic with the absolute, even though the absolute can never be talked about and we don't know what it is?
Yes, it's indeed just another descriptor for the absolute. Michael, would you like to answer that?
Well, it is this is a difficult question, which I think is not easily resolved. Motion requires relativity, because only that which is partial can move with respect to another partiality. However, the absolute, as we've been given to understand it, is out of relation with all other things, because it is all other things. So there's no possibility of relativity. Right. And its homogeneity means there are no parts that are real. However, there become conceptual parts which emerge, and that I don't want to get too much into it, but the principle of immutability demands homogeneity, and yet from homogeneity the illusion of limitation arises, and so then we can have what is called motion. But I don't attribute motion to the absolute itself. As I say, this is a difficult philosophical issue, and my own particular take on it is that there arises an illusion called motion. but the absolute itself is homogeneous out of relation to all things or no other things. And, you know, it goes back to Parmenides, whether there actually is or not, after the pre-Socratic philosophy. So I'm certainly, you know, willing to discuss that subject along the way. And, you know, I'm getting back into, be away from the identify as being group. Maybe I'll deal with it next. You know, I write for a month and then I go away for a week and I'll deal with this subject. Okay, I hope I haven't been too confusing.
No, not at all. You know, you bring up a good point, which is that it's inconceivable to imagine motion without imagining space or direction. And of course, direction, space as direction, that is to say the 6 points of space, is a function of cosmos, not a function of what's here described as the intercosmic. And so any motion that would exist is really beyond any conception that we could have. I could only imagine it as being livingness, and that there is something that is called, in our very poverty-stricken language, motion would refer to an aliveness. That
I call it isness or beingness or something, you know. But of course, well, you know, not to get too much into it, but the principle of limitation is required for motion to exist. And then we have to talk about how limitation arises. Anyway, it's marvelous. This whole undertaking to deal with the Proem and the Secret Doctrine is just wonderful. I just thank you so much, Francis, for really pushing us into this. Appreciate it.
Well, it truly is my pleasure. This idea of also of the eternal, which, you know, when first considering, it would seem to be an absolute function, and yet it is directly connected with time. And so in that way, it's a description of a conditionlessness, of something that stands beyond the condition of time, and yet it's only relevant from what you might say this side of the veil. In other words, to call something that's the absolute eternal is only in comparison, of course, to our relative reality. It would not itself have any need to have that descriptor, or any other descriptor for that matter. So you have to realize that in all these attempts to describe the absolute, it's just to try to come to some threshold of awareness, of course, which is one thing I love about it is it's a totally impossible undertaking. You know, none of us can possibly approach this kind of consciousness. But in the effort, well, as I mentioned earlier, at least we stimulate the intuition.
Yes, that's what it will do. And I'm of the opinion that any limited being, including the temporary cosmic being, is also, vast as it is, and deep as it is, and all-inclusive in terms of our reality, is also incapable of grasping the absolute infinitude, which I look at as the ultimate noumenon. So, you know, yes. So what are we doing down here as we try to reach? But of course, it will stimulate all our faculties, and we will apprehend more and more, and will become more useful aspects of the emanated purpose. You know, we'll have more fun along the way. So
yeah. Thank you.
Francis?
Okay. Yes.
Yes, we have several other questions. So
Terrific. Bring them on.
Dwayne, can you go ahead, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, Francis. It's such a joy to join you in this wonderful presentation. As a footnote to the idea of motion, I would say that the Tibetan outlines very extensively in Cosmic Fire that there are three main types of motion. Rotary motion, which relates to the third aspect of deity, more or less the personality. Cyclic spiral motion that relates to consciousness or the soul. And then progressive motion, which relates to the monad or the first aspect of divinity, which paradoxically, in its most esoteric form, is no motion at all. And if you take the life of any spiritual organism, which according to HPB in her work with symbols, it's spherical. And every sphere has three components. It has an outer wall, which we can call the third aspect, where energy rotates. And then as you move to the inner level, you come in contact with a spiral cyclic aspect. And then, of course, at the very center is that laya point of pure fohatic will, which is the point of pure silence or no motion.
Thank you for bringing those points forth. And all of those three, which are also related first, second, and third rays, first, second, and third principles, third, second, and first solar systems, and yet they all exist at the same time in all reality, sometimes quiescent, sometimes active. In this solar system, we're guided by the spiral-like motion, which interestingly is a combination of direct and rotary motion. You could say it's a rotary motion under the influence of direct motion, would be one way of looking at it. And yet all of these motions are motions within the cosmos, rather than this trance motion that belongs to the intracosmic absolute, which is not really anything that we can visualize or imagine, because, as I said before, we depend on the concept of direction and the idea of moving from point to point in order to have any conception of motion. Thank you for that, Dwayne. It's very useful. Anyone else?
Yes, Rose, please go ahead. You're self-muted. There you go.
This is kind of just showing the I don't even want to use the word stages, but the levels, even levels is not the right word, of illusion, because this is showing the relationship of the illusion in consciousness. So it's basically, to me, saying that consciousness is illusion, and it's a form of illusion, at least consciousness as we understand it. And it's not until, like you're talking about earlier, Francis, of getting to that, whether you want to use the word livingness or something, that's beyond the illusionary part of consciousness. And again, we really don't have words for what we're trying to say here, but this is linear. You know, when you have, whether you have motion or whether you have three forms of motion, it's still all differentiation. It's still all a part of that grand illusion that creates the phenomenal existence. And of course, there's different relationships of that phenomenal existence. And I think it's mostly about relationship versus about levels, or because when you get into that language, it's just more illusion because it's more differentiation. So this is more relationship is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. It's, as she says, it's finite and periodical, meaning that it has a beginning and an end in relation to cycles. And it is not omnipresent, it's finite. That is to say, it exists in one locale. So that's the motion that we know. And he, she. We won't go there just now, but at some point maybe. He, she is contrasting that with the idea of eternal and ceaseless motion, which, you know, as Rose just pointed out, can't be really even imagined. All we can do is pitch it up into the unknown by looking at the that which that comes from it, which in this case is the finite and periodical. Any other thoughts on this introductory paragraph to the idea of intracosmic and cosmic motion? Any more thoughts?
That's all I see.
Okay.
Francis, if I may, may say, I think Rose is correct on this point, that consciousness is one of the first illusions. I think, you know, it's like the contrast between no number and number, or between beingness and being. Mm-hmm. There is something which is the infinitely intense form of beingness, require no consciousness whatsoever, but is what we might call ultimate state. And when these things arise from it, whether it's will or the first differentiation or the first possibility of consciousness, they are vastly noumenal to us. I call them supranoumenal, okay? But they do exist in this post-prolaic world, and they are way, way beyond anything that can be manifested in cosmos. But from the fundamental point of view of that thing, or whatever it is, that's out of all relation, because it, you know, there's it, all those other things are illusions, including our three aspects of divinity. Now, that's not practical to know, because we have to handle this world of illusion in a very practical way in all of its relations and its levels and its combinations. If we were to look into absolute infinity, we would find every possible type of motion except the view of it arises on. Anyway, you know, it gets into deep stuff, but I think that what she said there, Rose, I think that's, you know, that's on.
Yeah. You know, first of all, that consciousness is an aspect of the second principle, and it's something that we strive towards as we move up through the initiations to open to greater levels of consciousness. But at some point, consciousness actually becomes a block, and we move into identification. But even that level, you know, this move from consciousness to identification, we're talking about the first 7 initiations, which from the point of view of the philosophy that we're looking at here is, well, it's like the brain cell of a fruit fly talking to the brain cell of another fruit fly about, you know, the theory of relativity. It's, you know, even the 7th initiation is compared to, for instance, galactic consciousness. It's you know, it's one of the reasons that DK never speaks beyond the level of the one about whom not may be said, because he just simply goes beyond his experience or the experience of anyone in the solar system. And certainly what we're working with here, these concepts, stand at a causal level to any form of consciousness or beingness that we could imagine. And so, well, as you said, what's the point? You know, except for, you know, then really all we could do is all together go join a Zen monastery and quit talking altogether, you know, and just say it's not that, you know, niet, because that's, but if you're a philosopher, there's not much joy in that approach. So, so we do what we can with this material. It won't stay at this high level, the Secret Doctrine, but as does decay, it works from the above to the below. And so she's speaking initially at these very highest levels. Okay, let's move to the next window. Now this is a footnote. Let's see here, let me find where I just was. Sorry. Where are you? Okay, so I have to go back up to see what it was. Yeah, okay. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this footnote, but I think it's useful to become aware of how what we're speaking about connects to different philosophies of different times. And so this is a footnote on what we just were looking at. And let's start again with the definitions and bios to the right. Can we get a reader, please?
Helen, can you read that for us, please?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I have a throat problem today.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll choose someone else, but thank you. Okay, BL. Hello, BL.
Dwayne, can you read that for us? You're on self-mute. Thank you. There you go.
Nominalist arguing with Berkeley that it is impossible.
Oh, wait a minute, excuse me, Dwayne. Would you read the definitions to the right first? That way we'll have some idea of what we're talking about when we get to those concepts. So,
Nominalists deal with the problem of universal, which dates back at least to Plato and is opposed to realist philosophies such as Platonic realism, which asserts that universals do exist over and above particulars. One version denies the existence of universals, strength, humanity. The other version specifically denies the existence of abstract objects, objects that do not exist in space and time.
okay, just a quick note here. So we're talking about complete materialists, complete materialism, which is akin to the modern scientific approach to spiritual reality or lack thereof. Okay, go ahead with conceptualism.
Conceptualism, the doctrine intermediate between nominalism and realism, that universals exist only within the mind and have no external or substantial reality, also called mentalism.
Okay, and go ahead with the bios.
Rosalind of
Compiègne.
1050 to 1125, was a French philosopher and theologian, often regarded as the founder of nominalism. Edward Claude, an agnostic who wrote that the Genesis creation narrative of the Bible is similar to other religious myths and should not be read as a literal account. He wrote many popular books on evolutionary science.
Okay, so the main contribution of these folks was to dispel a certain level of non-scientific thought, which is actually useful. But they, in so doing, they threw the baby out with the bathwater, denying, all causal existence. And then George Berkeley is of a very different color here. So, Dwayne, if you could read that short bio.
An Irish philosopher whose primary achievement was the advancement of a theory he called immaterialism, later referred to as subjective idealism by others. This theory denies the existence of material substance and instead contends that familiar objects like tables and chairs are only ideas in the mind of the perceivers and, as a result, cannot exist without being perceived.
Okay, now if you would, Dwayne, please read the text to the left. This is actually from the Secret Doctrine.
Nominalists arguing with Berkeley that it is impossible to form the abstract idea of motion distinct from the body moving may put forth the question, what is that body, the producer of that motion? Is it a substance? Then you are a believer in a personal God, etc., etc. This will be answered farther on in the addendum to the book. Meanwhile, we claim our rights of conceptualists as against Rosellini's materialistic views of realism and nominalism. Has science, says one of its ableist advocates, Edward Claude, revealed anything that weakens or opposes itself to the ancient words in which the essenes of all religions, past, present, and to come, is given to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly before thy God. Provided we connote by the word God, not the crude anthropomorphism, which is still the backbone of our current theology, but the symbolic conception of that which is life and motion of the universe, to know, which in physical order is to know time past, present, and to come, in the existence of successions of phenomena. To know, which in the moral is to know what has been, is, and will be within the human consciousness.
Thanks, Dwayne. Again, no need to ponder the fine points of these opposing philosophies. We have here a nominalism, very materialistic conceptualism, which recognizes the existence of mental conception as an abstraction. Then Platonic realism and subjective idealism, which are more akin to occultism, right? Just suffice it to say that these philosophies either accept or deny the existence of universal non-material reality. And some of these were more present and vocal during HPB's time than they are now. So this paragraph ends with the first in a series of HPB's famous verbal jabs at all religions that advocate a personal God. And she takes almost every opportunity to tell us what she thinks of those who limit themselves to personal God. So So we're not going to discuss this page. I would like to get on to, see, we're just going to be working with the text. That was a footnote. So if we could get a reader for this. By the way, the definitions on the right are come from an online source called the Theosophical Encyclopedia. It's published by the Theosophical Publishing House. It's really excellent. Gives us great definitions for these specific Hindu terms. So could we get a reader for starting with the definition of svabhavat in the upper right?
Stephen, can you read for us, please? You're self-muted.
Can you hear me well?
There we go. Good.
Let's start with the definition.
Yes, would you please?
All right. Phonetically, the word looks like sabahant. Is a world substance.
It's svabhavat. Svabhavat.
Okay. Svabhavat. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
Is a world substance and stuff, or rather that which is behind it, the spirit and essence of substance. The name comes from sabhava and is composed of three words: su, good, perfect, fair, handsome; sva, self; and bhava, being or state of being. From sabhava, all nature proceeds, and into it all returns at the end of the life cycles. In esotericism, it is called Father, Mother, and is the plastic essence of matter.
Great.
The next term
is svabhavikas.
Thank you. Svabhavikas. The oldest existing school of Buddhism. They assign the manifestation of the universe and the physical phenomena to sabhava, or the respective nature of things. According to Wilson, sabhavas of things are the inherent properties of the qualities by which they act, as soothing, terrific, or stupefying, and the forms, svarupas, are the distinction of the biped, quadruped, brute, fish, animal, and the like. In positive scientific research, the researcher is concerned with gaining knowledge in a world which is objective, using scientific methods of inquiry. Methods associated with this paradigm include experiments, surveys, where quantitative data is the norm.
Right. So in the positivist is very much like the nominalist. It's a later term that means that he's oriented towards the scientific point of view. So if you would please continue by reading the, this way you'll get another shot at svabhavika and svabhava, which I know you're dying to do. So
well, thank you for the opportunity. All right. Here we go. A few years ago only, it was stated in Isis Unveiled that the esoteric doctrine teaches, like Buddhism and Brahmanism, even the Kabbalah, that one infinite and unknown essence that exists from all eternity and in regular and harmonious successions is either passive or active. In the poetical phraseology of Manu, these conditions are called the days and nights of Brahma. The latter is either awake or asleep. The Svabhavikas, or the philosophers of the old school of Buddhism, which still exist in Nepal, speculate only the active condition of this essence, which they call the Svabhavat, and deem it foolish to theorize upon the abstract, the unknowable power in its passive condition. Hence, they are called atheists by both Christian theologians and modern scientists, for neither of the two are able to understand the profound logic of their philosophy. The former will allow of no other God, that the personified secondary powers which have worked out the visible universe, and which became with them the anthropomorphic God of the Christians, the male Jehovah, roaring amid thunder and lightning. In its turn, rationalistic science greets the Buddhists and the Svabhavikas as the positivists of the archaic ages. If we are to take a one-sided view of the philosophy of the latter, our materialists may be right in their own way.
So take note, thank you very much.
Gracias.
So take note, especially from this reading, the term Svabhavat. It will reappear often in the Secret Doctrine. And as the definition says, it is the spirit or essence of substance. But it is also more than this, for it represents that which becomes itself. Its self-existence, self-becoming, that which develops from within outwardly in its essential self by emanation or evolution. So we all belong to this quality. In fact, all existence is, in a sense, underwritten or overshadowed by Svabhavat, or this plastic, essential spiritual essence. Okay, do we have any thoughts or comments on this, this page, or this paragraph from page 3? Anyone?
I don't see anything yet.
Okay, well, sometimes it takes people a little bit to formulate. If you have a thought, just or a question, please raise your hand. Okay, let's move on. Could we get a reader for this paragraph, please?
Sabrina, can you read for us, please? We're not hearing you. Okay.
Is she self-muted?
No. Rose, can you read for us again, please? You're on self-mute. There you go.
Yes,
Thank you.
1 moment. The Buddhists maintain that there is no creator, but an infinitude of creative powers, which collectively form the one eternal substance, the essence of which is inscrutable, hence not a subject for speculation for any true philosopher. Socrates invariably refused to argue upon the mystery of universal being, yet no one would ever have thought of charging him with atheism, except those who were bent upon his destruction. Upon inaugurating an active period, says the Secret Doctrine, an expansion of this divine essence from without, inwardly, and from within, outwardly, occurs in obedience to eternal and immutable law. And the phenomenal or visible universe is the ultimate result of the long chain of cosmical forces, thus progressively set in motion. In like manner, when the passive condition is resumed, a contraction of the divine essence takes place, and the previous work of creation is gradually and progressively undone. The visible universe becomes disintegrated, its material dispersed, and darkness, solitary and alone, broods once more over the face of the deep. To use a metaphor from the secret books, which will convey the idea still more clearly, an outbreathing of the unknown essence produces the world, and an inhalation causes it to disappear. This process has been going on from all eternity, and our present universe is but one of an infinite series, which has no beginning and will have no end. This passage will be explained as far as it is possible in the present work, though as it now stands, it contains nothing new to the Orientalists. Its esoteric interpretation may contain a good deal which has hitherto remained entirely unknown to the Western student.
Thanks, Rose. So notice how breath and motion are used interchangeably. And we can add to these, to breath and motion, the word or logos being first uttered, the out-breath, which is associated with Brahma, then sustained, which is associated with Vishnu, then withdrawn, the in-breath, which is associated with Shiva. So we have, three ways of looking at this. Somewhere up in the middle of this paragraph, she describes moving from without inwardly and from within outwardly simultaneously. It sounds curiously like a wheel turning on itself to me, right? And it's difficult to understand that. But when you add the idea of the breath and of the word, which of course the word depends on the breath to be uttered, you get a sense of the nature of the what would exist at the level of the first, second, and third logos, which are progressive stages of manifestation, right? Using those three concepts. So if you're having difficulty with seeing this as motion, think of it as the in and out breath, which create these great periods called manvantaras, or as the word going forth, which is, of course, the metaphor we use when we talk about the planetary and solar logos, because that's what logos means, the word. Okay, any thoughts on this paragraph or on these concepts about the word and about the breath and about motion? The relationship between Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which are directly, by the way, directly related to these this particular quality of motion. Anyone?
Francis, we have a question from Eva. Go ahead, please, Eva.
Yes.
Actually, hi. It's not a question. I was going to go back to the word substance that has been used in a couple of these slides. And from our esoteric understanding, we tend to think of substance as that which stands a sub or under. And it tends to mean for us that it's the whole Deva kingdom. So when I think of that which is manifested, when it finally comes into manifestation, it is imbued with automatically that of the third and the first aspect. So it's imbued with the underpinning, which is all David's substance that we do not necessarily know, see, and don't understand its various grades. So it's not matter as we understand it when we touch it, but it is a form of third aspect, matter, which the Deva kingdom actually is.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point. You could say that matter substands substance. That substance is not necessarily physical. Here we're hampered again by our normal use of the English language, where substance is, something you could pick up or something you could, touch. And as Eva points out here, all it is that it substands, all it means is that it substands the causal levels. That is to say, it's substantive in that it emanates from that which it substands, right? So it points as much to causal levels as it does to its own existence, by the nature of the word that describes it, to substance, substanding. And there's, for instance, the second ray is very much connected with this process, as is the second principle. It's not just the third, because here we're talking about the divine geometry that is not physical or material, but is in a sense like the blueprint for that which is to come, and which then guides the Devas and the Devic kingdom into the literal manifestation. So thank you, Eva, for those thoughts. Anyone else on this? Why do you think Socrates invariably refused to argue upon the mysteries of ultimate being? What's that about? Any ideas?
Before we
Go
get
ahead.
to that question, we have a question typed, and then Dwayne's got his hand up. So, Dwayne,
Go ahead.
you're self-muted. There you go.
I have a question. Is it possible for participants to put an image up on the screen, or is that solely in the hands of the administration?
Let's see. You could make Dwayne a presenter and show his screen. That would be the only way to do it. And you're absolutely welcome to do that. Can you do that from BL? Can you make him a presenter? Is
Yes.
that possible?
Yes, I can
Okay.
do that. And while I do that, let me read to you Ash's question.
Okay. Do you have your image ready, Dwayne? Because whatever's on your screen will go up. Okay, great.
Ash's question is, let me see. Please, can you talk more of the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in simple terms if possible? The sound and breath of each?
Sure.
I'll let you think about that while Dwayne describes his.
Okay, while he's putting up the picture, actually, I'll go ahead and answer that question, then we'll get to Dwayne's picture. But go ahead and bring it up as soon as you can. And we can be looking at it while I describe this. Simply, the Brahma aspect is the creator aspect. That would be the out-breath or motion from within outward. Vishnu is the sustaining aspect, which would be after that initiating action of the Brahma aspect, the Vishnu maintains the uttering of the word, which actually maintains the universe. It is said that if the word were to stop, all existence would simply cease to be. And then the Shiva, the destroyer aspect, initiates the in-breath, which withdraws the energy from manifestation, and the dissolution of the material world begins as a result of that. Is that helpful to you? Okay, you can pull Dwayne up whenever you'd like.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay.
Is the image available?
Yes, it is. We can see it.
Okay. This image.
It's not up yet.
I can see it.
Oh, well, I can't. That's interesting. Go ahead. I wonder why I can't.
We all can.
Okay. Well, I won't be able to comment, but go ahead.
Probably looking at your slides.
Oh, I bet all I have to do is escape my program, and I bet it'll flash right up. Let's see. Let me hit escape here. Okay.
The image on the right is taken from the works of HPB and Dwal Kuhl, of course, in his wonderful presentation of the Ageless Wisdom. And this image is described in Cosmic Fire and is one of the key ways that the Tibetan tries to get the student to understand the idea of the spirit, or what he calls the breath, which we know is identification with the will or the one monadic life. Now, if you look at this as a composite, the M is the mother aspect, and it really is the third aspect of motion we talked about earlier, which is rotary. The next level up, which is the U, which is the heart, it is the consciousness or the love aspect, and it deals with spiral cyclic motion. And the A, which is symbol of the monadic life, the first aspect of deity, is, to go back to our previous conversation, progressive motion. Now, all three of these, as you so eloquently shared, Francis, are taking place simultaneously. But DK and HPB differentiate and separate them so that we might have a better grasp of what is meant by motion. And DK also says that if you look at the constitution of man, you'll see that he is spherical, and that this sphere is made up of two types of motion. One coming in, which is called centripetal, and then outward, centrifugal. So what you have is you have this rushing in, and then you have this throwing out. And when the upper triad, shared in this picture on the right with the blue, when that upper triad, through the awakening of the heart, which is the middle principle of consciousness, fuses with the lower triangle, which is symbolized by the M, then you have perfect continuity of consciousness, and you have the A, monadic breath, working through the soul, and the soul in turn working through the integrated personality, which is mainly composed of lower elementals with their unique notes. So you have the lower elementals symbolized by the triangle pointing down with the M that is waiting redemption. You have the U, which is the heart of the system, or the Christ pouring in redemptive fire. And you have symbolized by the word. And then you have the A, or the upper triad, which is the great breath of God, which is extremely elusive and vague and very easy to not recognize until the third initiation and after. So that is like a summary of some of the concepts we have been discussing. Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this, because these webinars, Zoom meetings, and different things are relatively new to me. And this is the first time I've actually ever shared an image with another group. So I appreciate your patience and your willingness to try something different.
Well, great. And it's terrific to have your images. Unfortunately, it never hit my screen. I think it's because I'm the organizer. And so for some reason, that's part of the GoToMeeting interface that I was not able to see it. But I remember that illustration, not yours, but that AUM. It's interesting, as you point out, that the central part of the M is in a receptive or passive position, as is the U. It's upturned, and it's the A, which is whose opening, you could say, points downward, that from which all the source of all comes. Thank you, Dwayne, so much for that. And unless you have something else to share, we'll.
No, thank you.
You're very welcome. And we could switch back the screens. Excuse me.
Yeah, you can take control, Francis, and Dwayne, you're going to have to stay on the staff. We can't move you back, or we'll lose you.
See, once promoted, Dwayne, you can't be demoted. So
I always wanted a quick path.
Okay, what that means, Dwayne, is that you won't be able to put up your hand. So just simply speak or text BL or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Do I need to do the change presenter, or can you?
Well, either one of us can.
It says stop screen showing. Yeah, would you please show my screen again, please?
Okay, I'm making you the presenter.
Yeah.
Now you should have the opportunity to.
Presenter, show my screen. Here we go. Okay. Great. Okay, why in the world it went there? Oh, I see.
We're not seeing your slide yet. Okay, we have some hands up and we have some comments. So let me go through the comments. Asha says,
Okay, that's fine. While you're doing that, endeavor to bring my screen back up, please.
okay, I see it again.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Asha says, would it be oversimplifying or can we correlate the AUM with the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva aspects and the forms of motion?
Absolutely, you can. What is the creative aspect of the AUM? Where would you think the Brahma aspect would sit in the AUM? Anyone? Does anyone have an idea? Which Hindu deity belongs to which? If you're
go ahead,
clueless about this, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes. Did you have his
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just reading from some notes here. Is the source of the light of consciousness, caused to expand through the power of sattva. Is the god Vishnu. And so Vishnu is the upholder, as you said. Yeah. Carries the power of rajas. Through rajas, the light of consciousness is reflected inwards, giving universal knowledge. And is Brahma, as you said, the creator. So rajas is the creating power, and sattva the upholding. And Ma carries the power of tamas, and that's the god Shiva, as you mentioned, the destroyer. I don't know if that helps.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's interesting, as I don't know if you've heard, there's a power that's described later in the Secret Doctrine called vril, which is the ability to use sound to literally vibrate the material realm apart. And if you think about the v sound and the m sound, you can see the agitating aspect of these particular consonants, which actually are enlivened by the breath, right? So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, let's go on to the next slide.
We have more comments and a hand.
Go ahead.
Okay. Jeremy says the universality and potency of our personal breath, so much the focus in mindfulness meditation, which sustains our life and corresponds to the great breath, provides such a beautiful existential link to this reality.
Nicely said. Yes, indeed. That our breath, where they say our soul is as close as our breath, or divinity is as close as our breath. It's literally true. It's just a question of being able to bridge the gap between the universal breath and our own breath, which is of the same essential energy. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Yes, and then Tanya has her hand up. Please go ahead, Tanya.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Tanya.
Okay. Well, I was wondering if this Vishnu is related to the phase of the pranayama called retention or kumbhaka. So there's a moment when you breathe in, a moment you breathe out, but there's a moment where you just stand still. A point of inertia is reached. And would this be related to Vishnu as a sustainer? Or in other words, this point of retention is motionless also as well.
Yeah, very good point. It exists, you know, DK actually talks about this point and gives it a very high value in terms of what happens during that point of retention at both the top and the bottom of the breath when meditating. And it is the point of greatest reception. I can't say with any kind of philosophic knowledge that is related to Vishnu, but it just makes sense. It's the logical conclusion that yes, that point of holding would seem definitely to be a sustaining aspect. So I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tanya, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
That's all I've got.
Okay, I'd like to move on.
Wait. I thought I had my hand up. Sorry.
Go ahead, Eva.
Okay. So, what Tanya was just saying, in our parlance, we call that the interlude. So
right.
DK tells us there is, within this cycle, there is the in-breath and there is the out-breath. But in between, there is this point of the interlude. And if we can learn to hold that interlude motionless, silent, and go deep, this is the point of contemplation. This is the point that takes us to the real, yeah. That was one point I wanted to make. And the other point I wanted to make, which I find so interesting, as we're dealing here with the Proem, and Blavatsky really is trying to show us here the macrocosm. Well, we, in our finite minds, have such a difficult time conceiving of all of this. Hence, we find ourselves bringing it back down to an area that we can relate to, and that is, much more microcosm. So we bring it down to ourselves, and we bring it down to something closer to home. Although, everything is reflected, it's just that it's interesting how, in order for us to really get it, we need to be able to digest that and to make it more easier for ourselves.
Yeah. There's a saying in Buddhism that says, you see the person pointing to the moon, and you say, don't mistake the finger that's pointing to the moon for the moon itself. And any and all speech about the absolute, no matter how eloquent, is that finger pointing to the moon. There is no language. Language itself is a part of the diversity, which is totally other than, and yet included within, paradoxically, the absolute. So, we're in a sense on a fool's errand to talk about the absolute. And I guess Socrates, not wanting to be a fool, as it says here, invariably refused to argue about this level of universal being. But I think as students, it's useful, if for no other reason, to realize how futile it is ultimately. So with that, I'm going to move us into the next slide. And
Francis, Walter actually answered your question. He
great.
says, presumably Socrates refused to argue upon the mystery of the universe being because it's beyond that which can be known or defined in a simple intellectual manner. It's similar to how some religions refuse to depict deity or prophets to hopefully prevent the abstract from being concretized and idolized.
Thank you, Walter. That's excellent. That, especially that last sentence, is so important. That I think it's also why Islam forbids imagery too, at least and at the esoteric levels of the origin of the concept of preventing images or discouraging imagery, is because the infinite simply has no boundary. It cannot be described. And any effort to do so lessens it. It's best to stay just with the philosophy of the absolute. And then, of course, Socrates takes it a step further and says even any discussion of it is useless, basically. This is also the belief of the philosophers of the Eastern religions, that when you're talking about para-brahman, the highest levels, that any reference at all is futile and can only serve to hide the reality. But since it's already hidden, we make this effort mostly to stimulate our intuitions. Okay. So I would like to move ahead here and get into, at least, as always, I'm dismayed by how quickly the time passes. But I would like to get into these, back to the symbols. Now we've had the two symbols you see in the upper left there so far, right? And this introduces a third symbol. And so, but first I'd like to define our terms. And this is a kind of a double whammy, because the first definition is of a deity, which appears in the text. And then the second definition are two terms that appear in the definition of a deity. Nonetheless, all these terms, and the reason that I'm going to such trouble to define them is because they'll recur constantly through the Secret Doctrine. So, becoming acquainted with their meaning will make it much easier a little further down the line. Right now, it's like, may feel like a vertical climb, but once we get a little more familiar with our terminology, that feeling should ease. So could we have a reader to define, just to read the three definitions here, starting with aditi.
Walter, can you read for us, please? You're self-muted. Thank you.
Yes. Aditi, Sanskrit. Aditi from a not plus dt bound, from the verbal root da, to bind, unbounded, free, an infinite and shoreless expanse. In the Vedas, Aditi is Deva Matri, mother of the gods, as from and in her cosmic matrix all the heavenly bodies were born. As the celestial virgin and mother of every existing form and being, the synthesis of all things, she is the highest Akasha. Aditi is identified in the Rig Veda with Vak, mystic speech, Vash, mystic speech, and also with the Mula Prakriti, cosmic spirit substance of the Vedanta. As the womb of space, she is a feminized form of Brahma. The line in the Rig Veda, Daksha sprang from Aditi, and Aditi from Daksha, has reference to the eternal cyclic rebirth of the same divine essence. In one of its most mystic aspects, Aditi is divine wisdom.
And go ahead with Akasha.
Akasha, Sanskrit. Akasha, from a, the verbal root kas, to be visible, appear, shine, be brilliant. The shining ether, cosmic space, the fifth cosmic element. The subtle, supersensuous spiritual essence which pervades all space. It is not the ether of science, but the ether of the ancients, such as the Stoics, which is to ether what spirit is to matter. In the Brahmanical scriptures, Akasha is used for what the northern Buddhists call Sabhavat, more mystically Adi Buddhi, primeval Buddhi. It is also Mula Prakriti, cosmic spirit substance, the reservoir of being and of beings. Genesis refers to it as the waters of the deep. It is universal substantial space, and mystically in its highest element is alaya, the indissoluble. Daksha, Sanskrit.
Go ahead.
Daksha, Sanskrit, from dox, to be able, strong, adroit, able, intelligent, clever, used as a proper noun, intelligent power or ability. One of the chief prajapatis, cosmic creative intelligences, spiritual entities, the synthesis or aggregate of the terrestrial progenitors, including the Pitris. Daksha signifies intelligence or competence, but usually carries with it the idea of creative or evolving power.
Great. Now from the Secret Doctrine.
The first illustration being a plain disk, the second one in the archaic symbol shows a disk with a point in it. The first differentiation in the periodical manifestations of the ever-eternal nature, sexless and infinite. Aditi is that.
In that. Aditi in that.
Aditi in that. Rig Veda, the point in the disk, or a potential space within abstract space. In its third stage, the point is transformed into a diameter. It now symbolizes a divine, immaculate, Mother Nature within the all-embracing absolute infinitude.
Thank you, Walter. I really appreciate it. Okay. Comments on this paragraph. We have a bewildering array of Sanskrit terms here in this paragraph. Let's see here, get back on. Yeah, here are the terms that just appeared. And you can see that this upper group represent pretty much the same ideas. They can be interchanged. They're not precisely identical, but they evoke the same idea, which is a supersensuous spiritual essence, the reservoir of being and of beings. Okay, it's at the highest, the very highest level of manifestation, right? Okay, and then just below that we have Aditi, Deva, Matri, and Vash, which are the feminine aspect of this spiritual essence, also known as the Great Mother and the Word, which interestingly is a second aspect concept, the Word is. And we have in that there's a feminine quality. And then finally, Daksha, which is strength, intelligence, the creative or evolving power, which is the masculine aspect of this spiritual essence. So I hope that, helps navigate this sort of bewildering group of terms. So do we have any thoughts on or questions on this short paragraph? Now it's just we're just looking at the paragraph there at the bottom, where it starts with the first illustration being a plain disk. So we have a progression, right? We have the that which is the symbol of the absolute, right? The circle with a plane, and then we have the circle with a point in the center, which is the potential of manifestation, but not manifestation itself. Finally, we have the beginning of the manifested realm, which is that diameter that you see there on the right, which is in a relation of 3.1415 to 1, the circumference to that diameter, is the feminine principle because manifest. Okay, also symbol for the second logos. It still is not physical, but it is in that stage of pre-generation, in the, you could say, the blueprint stage. So, any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Aditi in that. Go ahead.
I don't see anything.
No one? Okay.
Everybody's still pondering.
Sure. I mean, it takes time. The phrase aditi in that, now the that is referring to the disk, right? The aditi to that point in the disk, which is potentially becomes then the diameter, which is the full relationship between manifestation and that from which it is manifesting, which is symbolically the diameter and the circumference. Okay. Okay, that's fine. We're going to move on to the next and move into our last few minutes here. Take this line of symbolism down a bit, down from on high. Okay. So could we get a reader to read the definition of pantheism? Anyone?
Can you go ahead, please, Asha?
Actually, I was volunteering to read the previous page because I know a little Hindi, but I'll do this one. I'm not too good with the Greek things. Pantheism, from Greek pan, all, plus theos, God. According to Plato, theos is derived from being, to move.
Yeah.
Hence, pantheism may be defined as belief in an all-moving or all-living principle. It is the doctrine that the root essence of the universe is utter divinity, that divinity pervades throughout and is the substratum, the inmost of all beings and things, every atom, sun, universe, man, God. Theosophic pantheism excludes the idea that deity is separate from the universe. And while denying monotheism and polytheism, when these two are regarded as being exclusive of each other, theosophy recognizes both as complementary, albeit partial statements of truth. Everything that is a manifestation in one degree or another of the all-permanent divine essence.
Okay, and now if you would read from the Secret Doctrine.
When the diameter line is crossed by a vertical one, it becomes the mundane cross. Humanity has reached its third root race. It is the sign for the origin of human life to begin. When the circumference disappears and leaves only the cross, it is a sign that the fall of man into matter is accomplished, and the fourth race begins. The cross within the cycle symbolizes pure pantheism. When the cross was left uninscribed, it became phallic. It had the same and yet another meaning as a tau inscribed within a circle, or as a Thor's hammer. The Jaina cross, so called, or simply swastika within a circle.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a descent of symbolism here. The first three of this, I was discovered in further reading, belong to the third root race. And then the one on the far right, the uninscribed one, is the fourth root race, is the symbol of that. And we'll talk more about that as we move into the text. So does anyone have any thoughts about this, this line of symbols or this paragraph from the SD? Any thoughts?
I don't see anything so far.
Okay. I would then like to go ahead, and we're going to be finishing shortly here, just with this group of symbols. Can we have a reader for this short paragraph that takes us back? Remember the third symbol here? Right here. There we go. You see the third symbol on the right. We have the, you could say the absolute, then we have the the masculine and the feminine principles described. And here we're going to get a little more information about this third symbol. A reader, please.
Michael S., can you do that? Thank you.
By the third symbol, the circle divided in two by the horizontal line of the diameter. The first manifestation of creative, still passive because feminine, nature was meant. The first shadowy perception of man connected with procreation is feminine, because man knows his mother more than his father. Hence, female deities were more sacred than the male. Nature is therefore feminine and, to a degree, objective and tangible, and the spirit principle which fructifies it is concealed.
Right, and that's indicated by the symbol itself. We have the upper definitely cut off from the lower here. And so that's the concealing that's going on. And you can see in this marvelous painting to the right of the Divine Mother, you can see this, this symbol at work. It's as though he based this painting upon this symbol. I mean, look at the face. You have the mind, the mental aspect, veiled, which is also the visionary aspect and all that is connected to the higher realms. In fact, if you were to find the center of that smaller circle, you would see that it's located at her head center there, right? And then you have the lower side of the face, which has the mouth and thus vash, which is the spoken word, which is the means by which manifestation occurs. Interestingly, you also have the larger circle, the center of that being the heart, being the, in a sense, the lower half of the circle of the head center, the top chakra, and the heart chakra. So you have that other kind of division, not so literal, but nonetheless there. In fact, this whole painting is full of divisions. So you have the physical realm with actually little people there. You'll see them in the bottom, divided from the astral or watery realm, divided by the rocky mental realm, often depicted as stone. And then she's sitting upon that, suggesting the higher mental and above. So this symbol very much informs this Divine Mother painting. So, any thoughts or questions about this symbol?
Yes, Eva, please go ahead. You're self-muted.
Oh, no, I was going to read. That's all I had my hand up for. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll remember
Thank you,
that.
Eva.
But okay, while you got me here, I thought the way you just described this, Francis, was excellent. And it's true that the male aspect is hidden. It is not as obvious as the feminine aspect, which is the third aspect. Anyway, you were saying something. It triggered something in my mind, and I can't bring it forth right now to articulate it well. So I'm going to just say goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. So, you don't have, for instance, just the bottom half of this circle, like a cup or a U upturned, right? You have the full circle. It's all there. It's just that at this point, the top half has been cut off from the bottom. And that's not an accurate way to say it either. It is hidden, not cut off, because it still informs all that lies beneath it. So, okay. Let's see.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say. I'm sorry. I remember what I was going to say. So you see, the third aspect, which is what we call the feminine aspect, is the one that has already been manifested. It's the one that's already been developed. The first aspect, which is deity, which is the masculine aspect, is still to come within the next solar system. It's the very last thing that we get to know, which is the monad. We already understand intelligence. We know that well. So it is the thing that is hidden. It's not yet revealed. Whereas we all, we're intelligent people that are already working towards the middle aspect, the part that, we have to develop the heart. So yeah, I really do think that it is well said here.
Well, so we have an involutional and an evolutional way of looking at this. At this point in the Secret Doctrine, because she's working from above downwards, this marks that point where deity is hidden from mankind or humankind, right? It's cut off through the diameter. Whereas on the evolutionary, we're at a stage where we're redeveloping our contact, and eventually this line will once again disappear. But even that description that I just gave steps it down quite a bit, because at this level, we're talking about all creation. And at this point, it's still undifferentiated. It's just at that stage of the divine essence, the akasha, which is also, remember, the name of this highest form of feminine reality. So that's where we're looking at now. And I think, as much as I would just love to go on and finish this, we're going to have to pull the plug. We've been at it here about an hour and 50+ minutes. So thank you all so much for attending. We're going to I hate to do this, but we're going to have to miss December's chapter. All the Sundays are already taken, and busy with other presentations, including the beginning of the school year for the Moria Federation. So we'll recommence in January on the third Sunday. Is that right, VL? We have that third Sunday, right? For January? Yes. So seems like a long ways off, but we'll pick up right here in January. And until then, blessings into each of you. And thank you for attending. So goodbye for now.
Thank you and goodbye.